right, so I've got 1 minute past 2, so let's go ahead and get started. So hello to everybody. I'm Gail LETTS, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this week's edition of Let's Talk. For those of you who are new to our program, Let's Talk is a weekly webinar designed specifically for women that discusses topics of finance, business, career, and health and wellness. And for those men who have also joined us today, we are very pleased to have you with us as well. So today we have 3 amazing women joining us. Chandra Briggman is President and CEO of Activation Capital, providing social, knowledge, and financial capital to tech clusters across the Commonwealth of Virginia. Chandra assumed this position on May the 1st and was previously Director of Venture Cafe Foundation in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where she was responsible for strategy and operations of the Global Network's flagship Venture Cafe Cambridge Innovation Hub. Jennifer Vaziralli is CEO and founder of 31 Harvest, as well as Fractional Chief Revenue Officer for Warehouse and Occasion Genius. In addition, she is Lecturer of Management and Entrepreneurship at Old Dominion University, a board member of Women in Venture, and a member of 757 Angels. Monique Adams is Executive Director of 757 Angels. Since launching in 2015, 757 Angels has grown to one of the largest angel groups in the country, with over 125 members and investors, and has injected approximately $63 million of capital into startup and early stage companies. So let's go ahead and get started. Let me start by asking each of you to talk more about your organizations, your backgrounds, and your passion for working with startups and entrepreneurs. And I'll start with Chandra. Chandra?
Great, yeah. So thank you, Gail, for inviting me. I'm not quite in Richmond yet, but I'm happy to get started and understand and provide some feedback to the ecosystem. Activation Capital is an organization, is an independent authority stood up by the Commonwealth of Virginia to help catalyze tech entrepreneurship across the state. So it's a 20-year-old organization. As Gail stated, we're looking to grow tech entrepreneurship by providing a number of resources to help educate and accelerate tech entrepreneurs across the state. Some of the programs in our portfolio include the Biotech Park, my body's gone blank, the Biotech Park, Lighthouse Lab, sorry, I went blank for a minute. The Dominion Energy Innovation Center. We also offer grant programs for ecosystem support organizations to help organizations grow entrepreneurship across the state. But I'm happy to be transitioning from Boston to Richmond to help grow entrepreneurship in Virginia.
Well, thank you, Chandra. And what the audience can't really see is that to Chandra's left, I believe it is, there is a wall full of boxes since the moving company was at her home yesterday afternoon boxing all of her belongings.
That's right. I have a very tight shot.
Right. Chandra, would you also talk a little bit about, you've been an entrepreneur yourself, correct?
That's right.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, so my interest in entrepreneurship started pretty early in life. I grew up in the South, in the Carolinas, and I just love the idea of business. I heard my parents talk about business all the time. My dad wanted to be a business owner, and I couldn't figure out why he couldn't be a business owner, but I started pretty young, experimenting with businesses. And when I moved to the DC metro area after graduating from undergrad, the first company that I launched was a digital marketing agency. This was the advent of sort of the internet, the intersection of internet technologies. And I wanted to bring that together with marketing and help businesses use internet technologies to market their business. I actually started a tech venture as well in the Northern Virginia area, focused on providing solutions for small boutique stores that did not have the technology capabilities as large retailers to sell their merchandise online. And I continued sort of in the tech entrepreneurship space. That's my tribe. So I've been in and around entrepreneurship for most of my career.
Thank you. Thank you. Monique, love to have you talk a little bit about 757 Angels and your passion with entrepreneurship and startups.
Yeah, well, first, thanks for including me and us. I'm really excited to be on this panel. And welcome, Chandra.
Thank you.
Almost here. You're almost here. So
Yeah.
Can't wait to meet you in person. And have a lot of respect for Jennifer as well. She's an active part of our group, and she wears so many hats. So I'm really honored to be on this panel with all of you. 757 Angels is a angel investment network where investors make independent investment decisions. It's a really exciting group, and it's been really fun to launch it and watch it grow. We were founded in 2015, and since then, we've become one of the largest single chapter angel networks in the country. We have over 125 members, at least, or 80% of them have made at least one investment. So that's really exciting, very active, very engaged. As Gail mentioned, $60 million is no chump change. So we're really excited to be a major player for early stage companies on the capital stack. You know, we have a great board, and that's something that I really want to mention. We have 21 board members, and we are very, you know, when we started, we had 15, and it became very clear that we had to be very intentional about adding women into the mix. And so at the time when we launched, we had about 13% women, and now we're up to about 30%. And that is because we were very intentional, and I'm sure we'll get into some of that as the conversation, but we definitely do have female representation on our board, and having a cross section of women and other points of view is really critical in terms of decision making. So very excited to be part of this panel. In terms of my background, real quick, I'm from Southern California, born and raised. I have a heavy financial background, so I studied finance and then worked in financial fields and real estate finance and in corporate finance. Moved to the East Coast, to New York City, did some corporate finance work, and then met my husband and came to Norfolk, which I refer to as Mecca now. And so came down from the largest financial market down to the Mid-Atlantic and the Southeast, and that was quite different at that time, but handled a bunch of Fortune 500 companies, or several of them that existed in this market, and learned a lot along the way. I think my passion for entrepreneurship really is seeded by my background with my parents. So I'm first generation. I'm the first generation of my family to have gone to college. And my parents both came over here on boats. True stories. So they have all those stories that they tell. And they were pursuing the American dream. And so hard work, discipline, a passion for learning, all of those things have been instilled in me. And so I have a strong appreciation of those qualities in entrepreneurs. So with that said, I'll throw it back to you, Gail.
Monique, I do have a question. So you founded 757 Angels in 2015, launched it in 2015. Mm-hmm. What brought you to that decision to do that?
That's a great question, and it's riddled with a lot of nuance. But so I was heavily involved in the finance world before I had kids, and I took a break to have my kids. And so I left work, but I stayed consulting. I was doing some consulting work, and I wanted to keep my feet wet. And so there was a successful venture capitalist in this community named Paul Hirschbiel. He actually was the founder of the group. And Paul founded Cornerstone Equity, who sort of famously invested in Dell. And some other very prominent startup companies. So it's hard to refer to Dell as a startup or an early stage company, but back when he invested in them, they were. Anyways, he was really looking for ways to get me involved and put my skill sets to work. I think the big lesson here for women that tend to be more conservative is that I was really scared. about jumping back in again. I was concerned that the markets had evolved without me. I was not as brave as maybe some would perceive me to be, and I needed a lot of convincing. So Paul, John Paris, and a woman named Ann Connor, who's an executive for Town Bank, really persuaded me that I was more than capable of doing this. And so I took on the challenge. But I think we all need to be more confident about our skill sets. I think I was way too apprehensive, and I think that there's learning from that. So Paul, John Paris, and Ann Connor encouraged and persuaded me to come back, and the rest is 757 Angels history. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. So turning to Jennifer. Jennifer, could you talk a little bit about 31 Harvest, your background and your passion with entrepreneurship and startups?
Sure. So 31 Harvest is a consulting firm that is really aimed at supporting startups at the early stages of their company's journey. And so really that company was founded by me about 2.5 years ago, really out of necessity. And I think sometimes we forget that sometimes the way we stumble across entrepreneurship is because life happens, and it just presents this really interesting opportunity to work for yourself and pursue a new passion and a new adventure. And so, you know, a little bit about my background and how I arrived at founding my own consulting company was I spent about 10, 11 years as a chief operating officer and a chief revenue officer for several companies, actually 5 companies. And so I lived in Washington, D.C., and New York and Chicago during that time and had some tremendous success. If you all venture back to technology companies, so Chandra and I are kind of one and the same there in terms of our exposure to the tech world, and had some great exits where companies were acquired and I did well. But one of the things is I was always an employee number 2. And no matter what I did, I always found myself making other people a lot of money and always kind of questioning my own abilities on whether or not I could do it myself. And so, interestingly enough, you know, I had a life circumstance that happened to me. And I think this is something that a lot of people may be relating to right now, which is we had some health challenges with some family members, and my husband and I kind of made the decision that we were going to move back to Hampton Roads, Virginia Beach, which is where we both grew up, and take care of family. And I think that I wanted to take that opportunity to invest in myself, something that I don't know that I had really done in a very dedicated manner. And so I founded 31 Harvest really with this idea of, I always thought that I needed this big idea to start a company, something that nobody else had ever done. I had to be a first mover. I had to come up with something incredibly innovative. And kind of, I was sitting one day and my husband said, you know, you're really good at what you do. You know, you're really great at helping companies figure out product market fit and helping them figure out how to grow and scale their sales and account management teams. Why don't you just do that for a living? And it was such a simplistic kind of set of words and such a simple, you know, piece of encouragement from my spouse. But I think, as Monique mentioned, I was also one of those individuals that doubted my own abilities to kind of step up to the plate and make it happen. And so I took his advice and I kind of set out to do it. And I want to kind of share that a lot of my passion for entrepreneurs stems from the fact that I still fundamentally believe that entrepreneurship is the single most viable path to generating wealth for many people in this country. And it's an opportunity to do a lot of good and contribute to the economy in a really meaningful way. And so what I thought to myself is, I can actually have a lot of things that I've always strived for. I can give back to the community, which is why I started teaching entrepreneurship, really inspiring that next generation of entrepreneurs. I can have control over my own work schedule and life by starting my own consulting business. And then I can actually help other founders and entrepreneurs achieve their dreams by making it through some of the critical early stages, some which can be very dangerous for startups if not navigated well, and helping give them the boost of confidence that they need to really grow their business. And so, you know, what I would share with me is my background and passion stems from a long career in working in startups. But I think it also stems from kind of this epiphany moment that I had what it takes to actually head out on my own. And more importantly, that life sometimes leads us to a second act or a side hustle or another gig, and that it's okay to embrace that and to maybe confront failure in a very direct way. And I found it to be incredibly rewarding and just a terrific learning experience. And it's a pleasure because I get to be a part of panels just like this day in and day out, really helping to encourage other people to pursue similar dreams.
You know, you make me smile, and only because I just started my company last year, and everything that you guys are saying is just resonating with me so much, as far as the doubt and the fear and all of that. But sometimes life does throw you curveballs, and you figure it out. And if you tell yourself every morning it's okay to try something different, and if anything, it's more exciting than ever. So Jen, let's stay with you for a second. You've just given us an awful lot to think about. You've talked about pushing yourself, having the confidence, but not having the confidence, all on the same ball of wax. If there were one or two or even three traits that you think are the most successful skills, particularly for a woman that's going to drive success, what would you say that is?
That's a good question. Hard one, Gail. Way to start it off in round two. So I think for me, I would maybe position or reframe that question of what I look for in entrepreneurs that I work with. You know, what allows me to actually take on a client and choose to dedicate myself in growing someone's business versus what allows me to say best of luck to them. Maybe they're a better fit for someone else. And I think, and Monique and Chandra probably have an interesting perspective on this as well, but some of the traits that I've seen that are really compelling, I would say first and foremost, humility. I know that sounds really funny, but there is this element of being grounded and being able to be coachable that is so essential at a time in which you don't know it all. And your company is not perfect. And if there is an unwillingness to take that criticism and to recognize what you know and what you don't know, you have to have that ability to be very humble and very coachable from day one, because I think you would be amazed at the value that others can bring to your entrepreneurial journey. And so I always look for a sense of humility, first and foremost. I think the second thing is a very passion-driven mindset. And by that, I want to be really cautious, because I think a lot of people say, well, I only invest in entrepreneurs who are really passionate about healthcare and they spent 20 years, in healthcare. And I don't necessarily have the same perspective. When I say passion, what I'm more so looking at is, do they have a conviction about their value proposition? How do they kind of feel it in their bones? Does it come out when they speak to you? Can they excite you about their business idea? And more importantly, do they also have passion, not just for the business, but for the people who make it happen? And so I would say humility and passion. And probably the third one, which I personally have struggled with, there's a great article about not all entrepreneurs looking the same. And I think sometimes women struggle with this as well, is a risk aversion, a fear of failure has been something that I personally have struggled with. And I don't think it's something that you have to have out of the gate, but it is something that you have to acknowledge you struggle with. And it's something that you have to have a dedicated and a conscious effort to push yourself to constantly take risks, try things out, and learn from them. Because entrepreneurship is literally a process of trial and error. And the best products oftentimes come from mistakes and learning and improvement. So I would say those are the three, humility, a real passion for the business concept, but also the people who will make it happen. And then that ability to know and prepare yourself for potentially taking risks and failing from time to time.
Well, I love all of that. And a few things I actually forgot to mention, so I'm going to do this right now, which is all of our listeners do have the chat or Q&A button on their screen. And if you have a question during this and you want to ask a question, please do that. I also do want to mention, though, because I am fast and furiously taking notes that I'll come back to, is we will be recording this and we will be posting it to the Let's Consult LinkedIn page. So for those of you who are not taking notes as quickly as I am or feel that you are missing some of the information, you'll be able to go back and to listen to that. So fabulous comments, Jen. Monique,
Can I add something to that, Gail?
you sure can.
I would like to add something. I like what Jennifer said. And what I would add is, because I've been an entrepreneur and the way that I think about entrepreneurship has evolved. And so I fundamentally see entrepreneurs as problem solvers. So what I look for when I'm listening to entrepreneurs is, do they understand the problem? You hear a lot of investors say that they love, entrepreneurs who understand a problem deeply. They've studied it. Because a lot of times the first idea or the first solution you may have for that problem may not be the right one, but if you're focused on solving that problem, you're more likely to want to pivot, as Jen said, go through a cycle of trial and error until you find the right solution. So, thinking of yourself as a problem solver, I think is really, really important, and having that lens on as you pursue that solution is important. And I think women are uniquely qualified for that. Anyone could do it, but I feel like if we think about entrepreneurship as something else, we think that it's not for us. But if you understand that it's really about solving a problem, then it could be anyone. And the second thing is, particularly for those who are interested in a tech solution to a problem, it is, thinking about what a solution could look like 5 or 10 years from now. So again, this is a mistake I made early on when I was building a tech solution, which was, I have an idea of what the solution should be for today, but I was not practiced in thinking about, well, what is it going to look like in 5 or 10 years? And so that gets beyond sort of like this, short-term sort of trend thing, and thinking really about like where this is going to go, where market's going to go in the future, and how might the solution I build be at that point in the future when it's most needed for the market.
And when you say that, that reminds me of one of the principles in Colin Powell's book, My American Journey. He talks about leadership, and he talks about the ability to see around the corners. So it's not just seeing what's right in front of you, but it's seeing past that. So I think that's really important. Monique, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think you all did such a great job of describing like what an energetic, passionate entrepreneur that can sell and hustle. I mean, Jen, you can come with me and do all my vetting on the front end, so you can sort of intuitively pick these on. I would just say one thing, like one piece of advice for women that don't know or are thinking, should I do this entrepreneurship thing? Of course, we all know that it's not rocket science, and you have to be risk averse, but there's also another path. You can join a startup team. You can learn what the startup life is about. And so if you're questioning, join a startup team, get engaged, get involved, learn what the life means. You will learn more in a day at a startup than you will in a year anywhere else. So that was just, one piece of advice.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So Monique, let's stick with you for a moment, and let me ask you this question. We'll start off with you on this one, which is, the COVID environment. I mean, we can't get away from it right now. It's all, you turn on the news and that's dominating everything, appropriately so. So how has the COVID environment impacted entrepreneurism, specifically as it pertains to women, from your perspective?
Yeah, COVID doesn't know the difference between males and females. So I'll start there. But let me just start with, I will speak from the investment perspective and how that has affected entrepreneurs. Clearly there's less investors, there are fewer investors, and there's less dollars being invested. VC funds, there's millions of articles now. I'm sure there are so many, but we all know that venture capital has pivoted its priorities. So it's shifted its priorities to providing bridge financing to the companies that they believe have the best probability of survival. So there's less venture capital available because the pool of money that was dedicated for new investments is now having to be shifted towards bridging those companies with the best chance of survival. Angels, they've lost 20 to 30% of their net worth, right? So there's a real loss in liquidity. Clearly, that just means that there's less people that can invest and there's going to be less investment dollars. What does this mean? What is the translation for entrepreneurs? There's still going to be capital out there. I'm not suggesting that there's no venture capital. I'm just suggesting there's less. And I'm also not suggesting that there's no angel or seed stage capital. I'm just suggesting that there's less. And that means it's more competitive. That means that entrepreneurs that are raising capital need to forecast that it's going to be harder and it's going to take longer to raise money in this environment. And they need to be much more realistic about the terms that they're offering in order to get investors to actually write a check.
Thank you. Thank you. Jen, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, maybe if I can take the other side of the coin is, Monique shared a little bit from the investor landscape. The one thing I would just add that I've observed in working with the entrepreneurs and founders that I work closely with day in and day out is that I do think COVID has, to Monique's point, whether male or female, just introduced new variables. So what I've seen is women founders who are trying to kick off a business and now they're teaching their students because they're homeschooled essentially for 4 hours out of the day. People who are dealing with illness, fear, maybe a less than desirable work environment to launch their business. So, I'm talking about very practical changes. So outside of just, can I get money for my business? I think a lot of founders are now grappling with all of the emotions that everybody is grappling with, and also about to take part in something that can be a very challenging and strenuous experience for anybody during a normal, period of time. And so, I think the takeaway from that is, how do you remind yourself of why you're doing what you're doing? How do you carve time out in your day that you can be dedicated to your business? And how do you apply those organizational and best practices that we all know exist, things like goal setting and milestones, to really get your business up and running in the smartest way possible? And I'll give you a real example. I've been working with some folks on another side hustle, if you will. I'm always thinking about new businesses in the human resources space, and a SaaS-based product, a technology product. And one of the things we were realizing is we were trying to get a minimal viable product, an MVP, off the ground to get some consumer feedback. And our original idea was we were going to bootstrap it and do it all ourselves and learn how to do certain code. And again, that scrappy, gritty, entrepreneurial spirit, which we would have done in any other time. But some of us said, listen, I'm having shortages. My full-time job has now pulled back. So I'm actually experiencing some money challenges. Or, hey, I've now got to look after my kids for 4 hours a day. I don't have time to learn how to create a website, a back end of a website from scratch anymore. And so that was a decision that we came together and we spent money on something that we probably wouldn't have. And we helped somebody else generate income for their family during this time. And so making those decisions and those trade-offs now, the set of evaluation criteria has shifted. And I think COVID has introduced a new set of priorities and variables that entrepreneurs, in addition to having to juggle getting a business off the ground, now have to grapple with. And I would just encourage everybody to really dig in, figure out a way to remind yourself of your passion and your goals day in and day out, and set some reasonable, achievable milestones and stick to it. And I'm a firm believer that while this experience has been really challenging for entrepreneurs, innovation comes from experiences like we're going through. And I'm a big believer that we're going to see some really interesting and successful companies, surface from this experience.
Thank you. Thank you. So Chandra, let's kick it back to you for a second. You've worked with lots of startups. You've been an entrepreneur yourself. What, in your opinion, are the most valuable lessons from mistakes that you have seen?
So a question I ask entrepreneurs out the gate is, or I would say aspiring entrepreneurs, is what type of entrepreneur do they want to be? And what sort of lifestyle do you want? I think, do you want to have? Because I think that there's certain types of entrepreneurship that gets a lot of the spotlight. And I think people assume this is the only type of entrepreneurship, right? And so I asked that question because depending on what sort of lifestyle, what sort of entrepreneur you want to be, that has implications for a lot of different things. So, I remember when I went through my first accelerator program, and there were some folks who came into the program wanting to have lifestyle businesses, right? So they didn't necessarily want to go and pitch investors. And that was sort of discouraged because the model that we were sort of operating on in this accelerator was from the West Coast, and there's a certain formula. And so I would say just starting out, just, self-examining, looking in and saying, well, what kind of entrepreneur do I want to be first? And then sort of looking at the resources that are there to help you on that pathway, I think is very, very important. Because you can spend a lot of time learning this formula for how do you build a high growth company and pitching investors, and you realize that it's not actually what you want to do. So I would say that's a big mistake. And then sort of chasing that, venture funding can expend a lot of time and money, and you realize that it's not the lifestyle, it's not what you actually want to contribute. So I would say that's a big mistake that I see entrepreneurs make. I think instead, you should really be focused on the problem. You have to be an expert on this problem, on the customers who are having that problem. A lot of times when you're pitching investors, if you decide to go that route, they want to understand if you understand that problem. Sometimes you are signaling for them something that's changing in the marketplace. They're not the expert. You have to be the expert. And so I would say, if you are focused intently on your customer, you understand that problem, all of this other stuff will take care of itself.
Amen.
Thank you. Monique, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this yesterday. One of the biggest mistakes I see is an overemphasis on the product. The best companies invite customers in often and early to provide feedback. And let's just face it, when you're the only person in the room, every decision is perfect, right? And so inviting customers in often and early, I think entrepreneurs make this mistake of telling us what people need instead of demonstrating what they want. And you can do that by providing customer feedback. So that's what I would share.
And in fact, and if I could just add a little bit to that as well, again, having just started my own company a year ago, I was up at a program in DC a couple months ago, and Professor Rosebeth Kantor, who is the founder of the Kennedy Center at Harvard, was talking about entrepreneurship and innovation. And what she did say is to anybody who is going to be an entrepreneur, if you think your company is going to look the same way in 3 months from the day that you perceive it to be one way, you're not going where you need to go. You've got to have that adaptability, and you've got to figure it out. It's an evolutionary type process. So I'm going to kind of follow back up, Monique, with the conversation that we had yesterday, because one of the questions that originally I had scoped out was saying, to a female founder, how would a female founder go and find an investor? And you made a great point that it's not as much finding the investor as finding the right time to go towards that investor or to do that search. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So timing is really important. There are different investors, and to Chandra's comment, this is really a heavily circumstantial question. It depends. There are different types of entrepreneurs that would seek different types of investment for their business. So we can start there. Angel networks are focused in high growth opportunities. So, understanding who you're actually approaching for investment. Whereas a Main Street or a small business might seek traditional forms of financing, so bank financing in this case, or other traditional forms of financing. So I would say understand who you are. So do your homework, get educated. Women cite that the lack of network is a real obstacle to them in terms of raising money. So get engaged with networks, learn and utilize that network to make introductions, so warm introductions to the capital stack, and that capital stack and people associated with the capital stack, investors or even bankers, they'll make introductions and you'll start getting pointed around. Also in terms of learning, where you should go and what you should do, in addition to doing your homework and getting educated and engaging with a network, always try to utilize a warm introduction. Cold calls, I get cold calls. Your hit rate with a cold call is just not going to be as good as it's going to be with a warm intro. So I highly recommend that investors that are seeking investment find someone that knows someone and get a warm introduction. I don't know if that helps. Would you like me to discuss sort of on the high tech, high growth side, where we engage?
Sure.
Does that help?
Yes.
Okay, so we are focused on the high tech, high growth. And when I say we, 757 Angels is focused on the high growth multi-market side of things. So we're looking in businesses that are scalable, that have big market opportunities with disruptive solutions. We are looking for companies that are beyond proof of concept. So I think that really goes to help define the stage of the company. So we want companies that are beyond proof of concept and that can demonstrate some product market fit. And product market fit is going to be demonstrated through customer feedback. That could be pilots, that could be betas, but early customers are best. Early paying customers are best. And folks, no, this is not Aunt Sally and Uncle John. These are real customers outside your circle of trust. And so we're looking for that. And then clearly, obviously, companies that are more attractive are going to be those that can show expansion of contracts with existing customers or retention of customers. Again, high growth, scalable opportunities. For 757 Angels, we only invest in Virginia companies. That's not true of every angel network. Beyond proof of concept and really interesting markets. And I also think it's important that companies that come to any angel network or seed stage funder can demonstrate a value proposition as well as a sustainable competitive advantage that helps to form defensibility. And there's a whole separate conversation we can have about IP and whether it's relevant or not, but definitely sustainable competitive advantage and value prop.
Thank you.
Gail, can I jump in on something Monique said, which I think is very important? I just want to double click on it just because it's so important. I want to say it again, which is the network piece. So in my work here in Boston, we did a lot of, hosting events to help people collide with other founders, investors. And so something I observed was that not as many women engaged in those sort of opportunities. And I understand why, right? So there's all of the, taking care of household that still is predominantly something that women have to do. And so what I would say is one of my mentors here in Boston gave advice to female entrepreneurs here. And her statement was, drink more beer. And what she meant by that was, you actually have to get out and make those relationships, because in times like this, when you want someone to pick up the phone and say, invest in you or hear your pitch, is because they already have some sort of relationship with you. And so I would say, things like the explosion of Zoom, I think is going to continue after we get back to in-person engagements, but being able to network and build relationships is critically important as an entrepreneur. And also, anyone could be an open door for an opportunity for you as a potential, an aspiring entrepreneur. And that could be a male, right? So, I love, there are times when I want to spend networking time with other female founders or investors, but you have to also be open to just co-ed networking and building those relationships, because you never know what sort of door may open through someone. So it's a little bit about getting out there, making those relationships, and not being afraid to talk to and engage and build relationships with anybody.
I could not agree any more strongly with that comment. So Jennifer, let me kick it over to you, kind of continuing on that theme, and then I'm going to kind of change topic a little bit in a second. We were just talking about women having to network and get out there, drink more beer. I love that. What other challenges, Jen? Now you teach management and entrepreneurship at ODU, at Old Dominion University. What other challenges do you see specifically for women in raising capital?
And it is an experience that I've gone through now, I guess, 4 times. Been at the angel stage, and then also at the Series A and Series B stage with venture capital firms. And so one thing that I would say is there's real, and Monique, I'd love for you to chime in a little bit more on the stats here after I'm done in terms of what actually is the data behind female investments. What I would say for entrepreneurs, part of this, full transparency, is the data that Monique's going to share with you is real. I mean, there is a real systematic challenge with getting female founded companies funded, and invested by venture capitalists. And there's some real barriers out there. What I would say is there is an element where it doesn't mean that we don't have to fight really hard to change it or that we don't really have to ensure that we are checking every single box. And so I think some of the challenges for female getting invested, first and foremost, timing. We've talked about this, but I just want to stress it isn't always the right time to go to angels or to go the VC route. Sometimes it is appropriate for you to do a loan. There are a lot of great loan programs for small businesses, for entrepreneurial ventures, especially women and minority owned businesses, that I just want to stress here. This gets a little bit to Chandra's, like, what business are you creating and what type of entrepreneur are you going to be? But I just want to stress here that the only source to capital, it doesn't mean that you have to go the VC route. There are plenty of people who bootstrap or go the loan route, at least initially. So that's one. I think the second thing outside of timing that women entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in general really struggle with is figuring out the right sources to pull from, and then adequately catering their conversations to that source. And by that, I mean, if you're going to pitch, for example, a venture capital group that specializes in one type of company, even at the early stages when they're vetting, you really need to ensure that every box, every single venture capital firm, every single angel group, to Monique's point, usually openly shares their investment criteria. They're not hiding that from you. And so if you go on their website, research the companies they funded, see what they have found attractive in the past, ask other people to go through your pitch deck, ask the individuals who are screening you for very candid feedback, and then respond and act on it. That's another really big thing, is that a lot of these companies are looking for someone to actually take their feedback and act on it. So I think do your research and ensure that where your pitch is in fact the right fit for you, and do your homework to ensure that you're adequately prepared for that pitch. And then the last thing is, follow up diligently. I think a lot of people have this idea that they're going to go and pitch to angel groups and like close out their round. Depending on the amount that you're raising, that doesn't always happen, especially in this environment. Or that they're going to go and send 10 pitch decks and packages to venture capital firms for a Series A, and 7 of the 10 are going to get back to them. No, not the case. And so the only thing I would say is fundraising is not for the faint of heart. It is a process that takes dedication and discipline at a level that I still to this day am constantly, when I go through it, reminded of how grueling it can be. And so I think really understanding your north, the type of fundraising partner you want, and making sure that you're doing your homework and not rushing it and being adequately prepared, it just makes all the difference. The last thing I would just say is we're focusing mostly on angel investing, which I think we should, given this audience. When it comes to angel investors, one thing I would just remind everybody is also think about the type of individuals that you want to be partnered with. This is where I'm going to put my entrepreneur hat on, which is there are active investors that are going to want to get up on the phone and give you advice and talk to you once a month. And then there are investors that are going to hand you a check, and as long as you don't, drive the company to the ground. They're pretty much hands off. And one thing that entrepreneurs don't think about enough is the type of money they want to take and who they want to take it from. And this is a very nuanced thing, but just I would say, a big challenge for investors is they chase the money as opposed to chasing the right money. So timing, right preparation and research, and then being really diligent that you're sourcing funds from the right fit or the right source, I think are all things that are really meaningful challenges to overcome. And Monique, I don't know if you have some stats in terms of women investment, but that may be helpful to kind of round this out.
Yeah, I do. Gail, do you want me to?
Yes, I was just going to go there. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, Jen, that's great tee up. I think in addition to getting educated, as Jen has talked about, and really doing your homework, all of those things are much appreciated by the investment community. I think that we really need to think about that there is real gender bias that exists, and I don't want to ride my high horse, but there's tons of research on this as well, and that women are likely to be treated 2 times as negatively as their male counterparts. And generally, this same research that came out of Columbia on first impression bias basically says that women typically get, most of their questions are focused on risk, whereas most of the male questions are focused on reward. And so that the outcomes that negatively affects outcomes. There has been a ton of great work and a ton of intentionality around female-focused investing, and that's really good news for all of us, including some of the things that are going on in our state. Jen and I are both involved in Women in Venture. That's made a real big difference for my organization, utilizing that as a channel to get more women involved. Still, the statistics are really somber. It is still a man's world. Unfortunately, venture capital is a white man's world. So some of the statistics, 60% of women on the investor side, 60% of women are wealth holders, yet only 10% of women invest in venture and angel investments. And then, of those women, and on the venture capital side, less than 10% of decision makers at venture capital firms are women. Okay, so when you think about, we don't have enough women at the table, and then you think about the population of women at the table, there's 1 out of every 10 that are making decisions. So that is not helpful. The other thing on the entrepreneur side, and this is where there is some good news, there's a lot of female-focused funds. There's a lot of groups like Launch for GS that are really focused on solving this problem. And again, networks like Women in Venture are also working on this as well. But on the entrepreneur side, I'm going to just pull some specific statistics. In the US, VC investment to female founders in 2019 was 2.8%, $3.3 billion, but that represented only 2.8% of all venture capital invested across the US. The good news there is that that was up from $3 billion the previous year, and I think $2.7 billion in the year before that. Still way too small. Globally, only 3% of money is funneled towards female founding teams. And when you look at teams that include a female founder, not purely a female founding team, it's about 10% of the venture capital. Looking at Q1 2019, there was $7 billion in one study that was channeled towards female-founded teams, and that study, which is has a little more, is heavier on the investment, shows though that in 2020, in the same first quarter, it's only $3 billion. Of course, the end of that quarter negatively affected by COVID, but a lot of that quarter, a lot of that investment. So we have a lot more work to do. One of your questions to me before was, specific in the wake of COVID, like how is this affecting the female investment community? Look, we had a steep curve. We were climbing a steep mountain going into this. And this disproportionately affects females, okay? And then this is magnified among people of color. And so we have to be very intentional about doing work because everything in the wake of COVID has gotten harder. So the statistics point to a very small pool of money going to female founders, and we have a lot of work to overcome that.
Well, thank you. And I think I'll take my last question and head it towards Chandra as I try to be very mindful of the time that we have. So, and this wasn't a question that I prepared, but Monique, you just said something that I think might be a great way to end today's conversation. So we know that as a result of COVID, I mean, there's statistics that say that 60% of the job losses that were experienced in the month of March were women. And somebody, I think I might have given you, Monique, or Jennifer, had commented earlier about the challenges that women are going through that are a little bit unique. Even though, maybe with Chandra, that even though there are many men who do share equally in family responsibilities, it's a disproportionate small number compared to women. So women right now are struggling, particularly those that are home with young kids and they're homeschooling and they're trying to figure out, where do I go from here? And you have time to sit back and think through your life and might be wanting to make some changes. So Chandra, what piece of advice do you have for the women that are on the phone that are kind of going through this contemplative thought process on, should I decide to step out?
Yeah, so listen, as Jennifer said, a lot of women and men, but a lot of women are juggling a lot of responsibilities and sort of this disruption that we've seen with COVID. But and you have to take care of that. You have to, take care of your household. But for those who do have the bandwidth, and this is a great opportunity because I think it was Jennifer said earlier, there's a lot of disruption, but there's a lot of opportunity to solve some of the problems. This has been like an earthquake to a lot of different sectors in our country. And so we've exposed some faults that need repair. So this is really a good opportunity to take a step back and look at what problems need to be solved in the way we work and in the way we live. And as I said before, the businesses that we see in existence today is a reflection of only a subset of the problems that exist. And I believe that the lens that women have in the world is uniquely suits them to solve certain problems. And if we don't have women in the game, those problems might not get solved. And so for those who do have the bandwidth and the ability to think about stepping into the ring and helping to solve some of these problems, you might be the only person that can help us, gain that perspective and solve that problem. And what I would, number one, and number two, I would say there's a lot of resources around now that are available free of charge to aspiring entrepreneurs to learn the fundamentals of how to build a business, to get advice, to build a network, to find access to funding. So you will not have to go it alone. I know as an individual contributor, when I was in my previous career, I thought it was all about how hard I worked. When I started my first company, I thought about how hard it was I work and that meant I could be successful or not. What I have learned is that, no guy who's successful at a business is doing it alone. You will not be expected to do this alone. You have a tribe that can help you build and scale a business. And so I would say, again, women are uniquely qualified to see certain problems in our societies, and we really need you to come and solve those problems. So that's what I would say to encourage women.
Well, thank you. Great comments to end. And as I wrap up this segment, having been a banker for so many years and seen so many businesses succeed and fail, and particularly in the category of startups, what I just really want to impress on anybody is if you are an entrepreneur or you are thinking about being an entrepreneur, think it through. But understand, as Chandra was talking about, there are lots of resources that are available. There are lots of people that will help. I think women have a tendency to think you have to go it alone, and you don't have to. And organizations like Women in Venture, organizations like Let's Consult, that's what we're here for, which is to make those connections and to give that support and to help people think through these decisions, as well as activation capital. So Chandra and Monique and Jennifer, a very special thank you to the three of you for joining us today. You've given us an awful lot to think about, and it was interesting as we were putting together the topic for today's program. I will be the first to say it was a wide open topic, and there could probably be 10 different segments that will come out of this. And we did that purposefully because what we really want to do is hear from the listeners, the people who are dialing into these programs. I want to hear from you and tell me what it is that you want to hear more about. The topics that we talked about today, we talked about just the general topic of entrepreneurship. We talked generally about raising capital. We didn't even get a chance to really talk about women investing in venture capital funds and how you go about that, how you choose the right companies to work with and individuals to work with. I agree with whoever said the comment about it doesn't always have to be about venture capital. It can be loans. I think that was you, Jennifer. And we have information on that as well. So I would just, for anybody on the phone who wants to learn more about any of those topics, please shoot me an email, gletts@lettsconsult.com. Love to hear from you as to what further information you'd like us to do programs on. So with that said, again, a very special thank you. Our program next week is one on leadership in times of crisis. And our guest will be Jeff Tanner, who is Dean of the Strom School of Strom College of Business at Old Dominion University. So again, Chandra, Monique, Jennifer, thanks so much for being with us today. To all of our listeners, thank you for being with us as well. Hope to hear from all of you. Hope you'll be joining our program next week. Have a great rest of the afternoon, and please stay healthy and stay safe. Thank you.
Gail.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.